Hey, you ever meet someone who thinks they run the whole neighborhood? Well, buckle up because this story is wild. Before we dive in, drop a comment below where are you watching from today. And if you love stories where bullies get what's coming, hit that subscribe button. Imagine a perfect Saturday morning. The sun is shining bright, the sky is blue, and a warm breeze tickles the leaves on the trees. In a quiet little neighborhood called Sunny Hills, kids zoom by on their bikes, laughing and shouting. Dogs bark happily, chasing balls in the grass. And somewhere the yummy smell of barbecue floats through the air, making everyone's mouth water. It's the kind of day where you just want to kick back, relax, and enjoy life. That's exactly what Jake Thompson was thinking. Jake was a new guy in Sunny Hills. He moved into a small house with a neat lawn and a big backyard just a few weeks ago. Jake was the kind of person everyone liked right away. He had a friendly smile, wavy brown hair, and a laugh that made you want to laugh too. He wasn't loud or showy, but he was smart, really smart. He loved messing around with gadgets, things like remote-controlled cars, drones, and his favorite toy of all, his brand-new smart grill. This grill wasn't like the old rusty ones you see at picnics. Oh no, this was a high-tech, super cool grill that could do all sorts of amazing things. It was shiny silver with buttons that glowed and a screen that showed you exactly how hot it was. You could even talk to it. All Jake had to say was, "Grill, cook me a burger." And it would start heating up, making sure the burger came out juicy and perfect every time. Jake saved up his money for months to buy this grill, and he was so proud of it. To him, it wasn't just a grill. It was like a best friend who loved cooking as much as he did. That sunny Saturday, Jake was in his backyard, setting up his grill for a little barbecue. He had a plate of burgers ready, some hot dogs, and a big bowl of potato salad his mom taught him how to make. He was humming a song, feeling happy, imagining how good those burgers would taste. The neighborhood was alive with sounds, kids playing, lawnmowers buzzing, and birds chirping in the trees. Everything was perfect, or so Jake thought. But trouble was coming, and it had a name: Karen Winslow. Karen was the president of the Sunny Hills Homeowners Association, or HOA for short. The HOA was supposed to make sure the neighborhood stayed nice, with rules about things like how tall your grass could grow or where you could park your car. But Karen, she didn't just follow the rules, she acted like she made them. And to her, everyone else was just supposed to obey. Karen was tall and skinny, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. Her hair was always pulled back in a tight bun, and she carried a clipboard everywhere she went, scribbling notes about anything she didn't like. If your garbage can was out too long, Karen would know. If your dog barked one time too many, Karen would write it down. If your mailbox wasn't the exact right shade of blue, Karen would leave a mean note on your door. The neighbors called her HOA Karen when she wasn't around, and they rolled their eyes whenever her name came up. To Karen, Jake was just the new guy. She didn't know much about him, and she didn't care to. All she knew was that he had a fancy grill in his backyard, and she didn't like it, not one bit. To her, anything new or different was trouble, and Jake, he was about to find out just how much trouble Karen could cause. See, Jake wasn't like most people. He wasn't just a guy who liked gadgets and barbecues. He had a secret. A big, juicy secret that nobody in Sunny Hills knew about, not even his next-door neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, who brought him cookies when he moved in. Karen thought she had Jake all figured out. She thought he was just some young guy who didn't know the rules, someone she could boss around like she did everyone else. But oh, was she wrong. That Saturday, as Jake was setting up his grill, he had no idea Karen was watching him. She was standing by her window, peeking through her curtains, her lips pressed into a thin, angry line. She didn't like the look of that grill. It was too shiny, too modern, too different, and Karen hated different. She grabbed her clipboard, slipped on her sneakers, and marched out of her house, ready to give Jake a piece of her mind. Now, Jake was just putting the first burger on the grill when he heard footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. He looked up, and there she was, Karen Winslow, standing at the edge of his backyard, her arms crossed and her eyes glaring like lasers. "Young man," she said, her voice loud and sharp like a teacher catching a kid chewing gum in class. "What do you think you're doing with that thing?" Jake blinked, confused. Hi," he said politely. "I'm just grilling some burgers. Want one?" Karen's face turned red. "I don't want a burger," she snapped. "That grill is against the rules. It's too close to the fence and it's making too much noise." Jake scratched his head. His grill wasn't loud, it was electric, so it didn't even make smoke. And he'd measured the distance to the fence himself. The HOA rules said grills had to be 5 feet away, and his was exactly 5 feet, maybe even a little more. He tried to stay calm. "Ma'am, I checked the rules," he said. "My grill's fine, it's not breaking any laws." Karen's eyes got even narrower, like a cat about to pounce. "Don't you talk back to me," she said. "I'm the HOA president, and I say that grill has to go. You'll take it down, or I'll make sure it's gone myself." Jake didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at her, his face calm but his brain working fast. Most people would have gotten mad or scared. But Jake, he wasn't like most people. He didn't yell or argue. He just smiled a tiny smile, the kind that said, "Okay, Karen, you do you." Then he turned back to his grill and flipped a burger like she wasn't even there. Karen huffed, spun around, and stormed off, her clipboard bouncing against her hip. She was muttering under her breath, something about teaching him a lesson and new people who think they're special. Jake watched her go, his smile fading just a little. He wasn't afraid of Karen, but he knew she wasn't going to stop. She was like a dog with a bone. Once she got an idea in her head, she wouldn't let go. But here's the thing, Karen didn't know who she was messing with. Jake wasn't just some guy with a cool grill. He wasn't just a new neighbor who liked to barbecue. He had a secret, and it was a big one. A secret that could turn Karen's whole world upside down. And by the time this story is over, Karen's going to wish she'd never walked into Jake's backyard. So, what do you think Jake's secret is? Drop your guess in the comments below and let's see how close you get. Jake went back to his barbecue, but he wasn't just thinking about burgers anymore. He was thinking about Karen. He'd heard stories about her from the neighbors, how she'd find people for silly things like planting the wrong flowers or hanging Christmas lights too early. How she'd walk into people's yards without asking, acting like she owned the place. How she'd make everyone feel small just because she could. Most people in Sunny Hills were scared of Karen. They didn't want trouble, so they did what she said. But Jake wasn't scared. He wasn't the kind of guy who backed down from a bully. And Karen, she was about to find out just how big a mistake she'd made. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Jake's backyard filled with the smell of grilled burgers and hot dogs. A few neighbors stopped by, curious about the new guy and his fancy grill. There was Mrs. Lopez, who brought a plate of her famous chocolate chip cookies. There was Mr. Carter, an older man who loved telling stories about his fishing trips. And there were a couple of kids from down the street who begged Jake to let them try talking to the grill. "Grill, make me a hot dog," one of the kids shouted, giggling when the grill's screen lit up and said, "Cooking hot dog now." Jake laughed and handed out plates of food. Everyone was having fun, chatting and eating, forgetting about Karen and her clipboard. But Jake didn't forget. He kept one eye on the street, half expecting her to come back. He knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to give up. She'd be back and she'd bring trouble with her. What Jake didn't know was how soon that trouble would come or how big it would be. Karen was already planning her next move, and it was going to shake up the whole neighborhood. But Jake, he was ready, because his secret wasn't just a fun fact or a cool trick. It was something that could change everything. The burgers were almost done, the kids were playing tag in the yard, and the neighbors were smiling. It was a perfect moment, the kind you want to hold onto forever. But perfect moments don't last, especially when someone like Karen is around. Somewhere not too far away, she was picking up her phone, her fingers shaking with anger. She was about to make a call that would bring flashing lights and sirens to Sunny Hills. But that's a story for later. For now, Jake was just a guy with a grill enjoying a sunny day. Or was he? What was his secret? Was he a spy, a superhero, or maybe just a guy who knew more than he let on? One thing was for sure, Karen was about to find out, and she wasn't going to like it. Hey, don't go anywhere. This story's just getting started. What do you think Karen's going to do next? And what's Jake hiding? Comment below and let's keep this party going. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon in Sunny Hills, and Jake Thompson was having the best day. His backyard smelled like juicy burgers cooking on his super cool smart grill. This wasn't just any grill, oh no. It was the fanciest grill you ever saw, shiny silver with glowing buttons and a screen that told you when your food was ready. Jake could even talk to it. He'd say, "Grill, make my burger nice and crispy," and it would hum to life, cooking everything just right. Jake had saved his money for months to buy this grill, and he loved it like it was his best buddy. Right now, the grill was sizzling with burgers, and Jake was smiling, flipping them with a spatula. The neighborhood was buzzing with happy sounds, kids laughing, a dog barking, and someone mowing their lawn down the street. Jake felt like nothing could go wrong, but then he saw something that made his stomach twist just a little. A shadow moved across his wooden fence. Someone was there, watching him. "Excuse me," a loud voice barked, sharp like a teacher catching you passing notes in class. Jake looked up, and there she was, Karen Winslow, the HOA president. She stood tall and stiff, her arms crossed tight across her chest. Her face was all frowny, and her eyes were squinting like she was mad at the whole world. In her hands, she held her big HOA rule book, gripping it so hard her knuckles were white. That book was like her favorite toy, and she waved it around like it gave her superpowers. Jake froze for a second, spatula in midair. Hi, Ms. Winslow," he said, trying to be nice. "What's up?" Karen pointed at his grill like it was a monster. "That thing is against the rules," she said, her voice getting louder. "It's way too close to the fence, and that smoke, it's bothering everyone in the neighborhood." Jake blinked, confused. Smoke? There wasn't any smoke. His grill was electric. It didn't make clouds of smoke like old grills did. And he'd measured the distance to the fence with a tape measure just to be sure. The HOA rules said grills had to be 5 feet away, and his was 6 feet, maybe even a little more. He scratched his head, keeping his voice calm. Ma'am, this grill doesn't make smoke. It's electric. And I checked, it's far enough from the fence. The rules say 5 feet, and I'm good." Karen's face turned red like a tomato about to burst. Her eyes got so narrow they were almost shut. "Don't you talk back to me, young man," she snapped, shaking her rule book at him. "I'm the HOA president. I decide what's allowed around here. That grill is a problem, and you're going to take it down, or I'll make sure it's gone myself." Jake's mouth opened, but he didn't say anything right away. Inside, he was starting to get annoyed. He'd read every single HOA rule front to back twice. He knew he wasn't doing anything wrong. Why was Karen so mad? Why was she acting like his grill was going to ruin the whole neighborhood? But Jake didn't yell or get mad. He just took a deep breath and gave her a small nod. "Okay, Ms. Winslow," he said, super calm. "I'll double-check the rules." Karen didn't like that. She wanted him to argue or beg, but Jake wasn't giving her that. Her lips pressed into a thin line and she glared at him like he'd just stolen her favorite pen. "You better," she hissed. "I'm watching you, new guy. You don't know how things work around here, but you'll learn." Then she turned around, her sneakers stomping on the grass, and marched away. As she left, Jake heard her muttering, "I'll teach him a lesson. Thinks he's so smart with his fancy grill." Jake watched her go, shaking his head. He flipped another burger, the sizzle loud in the quiet yard. Part of him wanted to laugh. Karen was acting like his grill was going to start a war, but another part of him felt a tiny spark of worry. He'd heard stories about Karen from his neighbors. She wasn't just bossy, she was mean. She loved making people feel small. If your flowers were too bright, she'd fine you. If your mailbox had a tiny dent, she'd leave a nasty note. And if she didn't like you, watch out. Jake wasn't scared, though, not really. He was annoyed, sure, but he wasn't the kind of guy to let someone like Karen ruin his day. He looked at his grill, its screen glowing happily, and patted it like it was a pet. "Don't worry, buddy," he whispered. "She's not taking you anywhere." But deep down, Jake knew Karen wasn't done. People like her didn't give up easy. She'd be back, and she'd try harder to make him feel like he didn't belong. What she didn't know was that Jake wasn't just some new guy with a cool grill. He had a secret, something big, and it was going to make Karen wish she'd never messed with him. As Jake finished cooking, a couple of neighbors peeked over the fence, curious. Mrs. Lopez, who lived next door, waved. "Smells good, Jake," she called, smiling. "What's that fancy grill you got there?" Jake grinned and held up a burger. "Want to try one? It's the best burger you'll ever eat." Mrs. Lopez laughed, but then her smile faded a little. "Was that Karen I saw? What did she want?" Jake shrugged, keeping his voice light. "Oh, she just doesn't like my grill, says it's against the rules." Mrs. Lopez shook her head. "That woman, she's always picking fights. Be careful, Jake. She doesn't like it when people stand up to her." Jake nodded, but he didn't say anything else. He handed Mrs. Lopez a burger and went back to his grill. Careful? Sure, he'd be careful, but he wasn't going to let Karen push him around. He'd dealt with bullies before, and he knew how to handle them. Not by yelling or fighting, but by being smart, really smart. The sun was still shining and the burgers were almost done. Jake's backyard felt peaceful again, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Karen's words echoed in his head, "I'll teach him a lesson." What did she mean? Was she just talking tough, or did she have a plan? Jake didn't know yet, but he wasn't worried. Not too much anyway. He took a bite of a burger, the juice dripping down his chin, and smiled. Let Karen try whatever she wanted. Jake was ready. His grill wasn't going anywhere, and neither was he. But what was Karen going to do next? And what was Jake's secret that made him so calm? Those were questions nobody in Sunny Hills could answer yet. Not even Mrs. Lopez, who was already telling her husband about the new guy and his amazing burgers. Karen, somewhere in her house, was probably writing a mean letter or making a phone call. She thought she was in charge, that she could scare Jake into doing what she wanted. But she was wrong. So wrong. And soon she'd find out just how big a mistake she'd made. The next few days in Sunny Hills weren't so sunny for Jake Thompson. Karen Winslow, the HOA president with her mean glare and her trusty clipboard, decided to make Jake's life tough. She wasn't happy about his shiny, smart grill, and she wasn't going to let him forget it. Karen turned up the heat, and not the good kind like Jake's burgers. First, she started sending Jake nasty letters. Every morning, he'd find a new one stuffed in his mailbox. The letters were written in big, angry letters, saying things like, "Your grill is illegal," or "Take it down now or else." One even said, "You're ruining our neighborhood." Jake read them, shook his head, and tossed them in a drawer. He didn't rip them up or get mad. He just kept them like they were pieces of a game he was playing. Then Karen got sneakier. One day, Jake went to check his mail and saw a bright red sticker slapped on his mailbox. It said "violation" in big black letters. Underneath, in Karen's messy handwriting, it read, "Grill too close to fence. Remove it." Jake peeled the sticker off, but the next day another one was there, and then another. It was like Karen was trying to cover his whole mailbox in stickers. Jake didn't say anything. He just peeled them off, stuck them in his drawer with the letters, and went back to his day. Karen didn't stop there. She started talking to the neighbors, twisting the story to make Jake sound like a troublemaker. She'd knock on doors, her clipboard flapping, and say things like, "That new guy's grill is dangerous. It's going to burn the whole neighborhood down." Some neighbors believed her. They'd see Jake walking his dog or watering his grass, and instead of waving like they used to, they'd frown or turn away. One guy, Mr. Jenkins, even gave Jake a dirty look when he said hi. Jake noticed, but he didn't let it bother him. He just smiled, waved anyway, and kept on grilling. But Jake wasn't ignoring Karen, not at all. He was watching her closer than she knew. See, Jake had a special talent. He was really good at noticing things other people missed. Little things, important things, like how Karen's fancy red car was always parked in the handicapped spot at the community center, even though she didn't have a blue permit sticker on her windshield. Jake saw it every time he walked by. He didn't say anything, but he tucked that fact away in his brain, like a squirrel hiding a nut for later. Then there was something else. Jake heard whispers from neighbors about how Karen collected fines for years. If your fence was too tall or your trash can was out too long, Karen would slap you with a fine. $50 here, $100 there. But nobody knew where all that money went. The neighborhood park was still old and rusty. The community pool had cracks in the tiles. So where was all that cash going? Jake didn't know yet, but he was curious, really curious. Every mean letter, every sticker, every glare, it was like a clue in a mystery he was starting to solve. Jake stayed calm on the outside, but inside his brain was working fast. He wasn't just grilling burgers and waving at kids on bikes. He was listening, watching, taking notes, not with a pen and paper, but in his head where nobody could see. Every time Karen did something mean, it was like she was handing him another piece of the puzzle. And Jake, he was good at puzzles. One evening, things got really wild. It was a warm Friday, and Jake decided to have a small barbecue for a few new friends he'd made in Sunny Hills. There was Mrs. Lopez, who always brought cookies. There was Mr. Carter, who told funny stories about his dog. And there were a couple of kids from down the street who loved watching Jake's grill light up when he talked to it. "Grill, cook us some hot dogs," they shout, giggling when it answered in its robot voice, "Hot dogs cooking." The backyard was full of happy sounds, people chatting, plates clinking, and the sizzle of meat on the grill. The sun was setting, painting the sky pink and orange. Everyone was having fun, eating burgers and swapping stories. Jake was in the middle of telling Mrs. Lopez how to make his mom's secret barbecue sauce when he heard it. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Heavy footsteps coming fast. Before anyone could say a word, Karen Winslow burst into Jake's backyard like a storm cloud. She didn't knock or ask to come in. She just marched right through the gate, her face redder than a fire truck. Her eyes locked onto Jake, and she waved her phone in the air like it was a sword. "This is it," she shouted, so loud the kids stopped laughing. "I've had enough of you and that stupid grill." Jake looked up from the grill, one eyebrow raised. Hi, Karen," he said, super calm. "What's wrong now?" Karen's voice got even louder, like she wanted the whole neighborhood to hear. "This grill is a fire hazard," she yelled. It's dangerous, and you're disturbing the peace with this noisy party. I'm calling 911 right now." The neighbors froze. Mrs. Lopez's eyes got wide. Mr. Carter put down his burger. The kids hid behind their mom, peeking out like scared bunnies. Jake just stood there, spatula in hand, looking at Karen like she was telling a bad joke. "Karen," he said, slow and steady, "it's 6 o'clock on a Friday. We're just eating burgers, nobody being loud." But Karen wasn't listening. She was already tapping her phone, her fingers shaking with anger. "You'll be sorry," she hissed, glaring at Jake. "The police are going to shut this down, and that grill's going in the trash." She held the phone to her ear, talking loud so everyone could hear. "Yes, hello, 911. I need officers at 123 Sunny Hills Lane. There's a dangerous situation here." Some neighbors looked nervous, whispering to each other. Was Karen really calling the cops over a barbecue? Others looked annoyed, rolling their eyes at her drama. But Jake, he didn't look scared or mad. He leaned back in his chair, took a sip of his soda, and get this, he smiled. Just a tiny smile, like he knew something nobody else did. Why was Jake worried? Why was he so calm when Karen was trying to ruin his party? The neighbors didn't know, and neither did Karen. But there was something about Jake's smile that made you wonder. What was he hiding? What did he know that made him sit there, cool as a cucumber, while Karen shouted into her phone? The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. The burgers kept sizzling, but the fun vibe was gone. Everyone was watching Jake, waiting to see what he'd do. Karen thought she'd won. She thought she'd scared him, that he'd beg her to stop. But Jake wasn't begging. He wasn't even sweating. He just watched her, his eyes sharp and quiet, like a cat watching a mouse. Karen didn't notice. She was too busy talking to the 911 operator, making it sound like Jake's grill was about to explode. But Jake's smile said something different. It said, "Go ahead, Karen, make your move." And that smile, it was the kind of smile that made you think maybe, just maybe, Karen was about to step into a trap she didn't see coming. The sun was dipping low in Sunny Hills, turning the sky a soft pink. Jake Thompson's backyard was quiet now, except for the sizzle of burgers on his shiny, smart grill. Everyone was staring at Karen Winslow, who stood in the middle of the yard, waving her phone like it was a magic wand. She just called 911, saying Jake's grill was dangerous and his barbecue was too loud. The neighbors were nervous, some whispering, some frowning, but Jake, he just sat in his chair, sipping his soda, looking as calm as a sunny day. Then, faster than anyone thought, a police car pulled up. Its lights flashed red and blue, making shadows dance on the grass. Two officers stepped out, their faces serious. One was tall with a shiny badge that said Daniels. The other was shorter, holding a notebook. The crowd went super quiet, like they were holding their breath. Karen's face lit up with a big, smug grin, like she'd just won a prize. She rushed toward the officers, pointing at Jake like he was a bad dog. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she said, her voice loud and bossy. "This man's grill is a huge danger. It's going to burn down the neighborhood. I want it gone, and I want him fined right now." The officers looked at Jake. He was still sitting, sipping his soda, not even sweating. His eyes twinkled like he knew a secret joke. Officer Daniels, the tall one, turned back to Karen. He raised one eyebrow. "Ma'am," he said, slow and steady, "we're not here about a grill." Karen froze. Her grin disappeared like someone had turned off a light. "What?" she said, her voice wobbly. "But I called you. I told you about the grill." Officer Daniels shook his head. Actually, we were already coming here. We got a tip about some weird stuff going on at this address, and it's got nothing to do with burgers." The neighbors gasped. Mrs. Lopez dropped her plate. Mr. Carter's eyes got big. The kids peeked out from behind their mom, whispering. Corinne's face turned pale like she'd seen a ghost. Her phone slipped a little in her hand. What are you talking about?" she stammered. Jake stood up, slow and easy, brushing his hands on his jeans. He had a tiny smile, the kind that made you wonder what he was thinking. "Officers," he said, super calm, "I think you'll want to check the HOA records. I sent you some files this morning. You know, about the missing fines, the fake violations, and that secret bank account Corinne's been using." The crowd went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Corinne's jaw fell open and her eyes got huge. "What?" she shouted. "That's nonsense. He's lying." But Jake wasn't done. He looked at Corinne, his smile growing just a bit. "Oh, and you might want to check her car," he said to the officers. "It's parked in the handicapped spot again, right? No permit. I've got photos and timestamps." The neighbors gasped again, louder this time. Mrs. Lopez whispered, "No way." Mr. Carter shook his head like he couldn't believe it. The kids giggled, pointing at Corinne. Officer Daniels nodded, his face super serious. "Ma'am," he said to Corinne, "we'll need you to come with us." Corinne's face went from pale to white like paper. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked like a fish gulping air. "This is crazy," she finally squeaked. "You can't listen to him. He's just the new guy." But the officers weren't listening to her anymore. The shorter one was writing in his notebook, and Officer Daniels was looking at Corinne like she was in big trouble. Jake just stood there, hands in his pockets, smiling that quiet smile. Then came the big surprise. Jake wasn't just a guy with a cool grill. He wasn't just a new neighbor who liked burgers. He was a private investigator. That's right, a real-life detective. A group of neighbors, tired of Corinne's mean rules and sneaky fines, had hired him weeks ago. They wanted him to find out what she was doing with all the money she collected. And Jake, he'd been watching her every move, taking notes, snapping pictures, and building a case. Corinne thought she was so smart, bossing everyone around, but Jake was smarter. He'd found proof that she was taking the HOA fines and hiding them in a secret bank account far away. He'd seen her park in handicapped spots without a permit. He'd even caught her making up fake violations to scare people. Every mean letter, every sticker, every glare, it was all part of the puzzle Jake was solving. And now, the puzzle was complete. The neighbors started clapping, slow at first, then louder. Mrs. Lopez cheered, "Way to go, Jake!" The kids jumped up and down, yelling, "Corinne's in trouble." Corinne looked around, her eyes wild, but there was nowhere to go. The officers stepped closer. "Let's go, ma'am," Officer Daniels said, his voice firm. Corinne's shoulders slumped. She dropped her phone in the grass and her clipboard fell with a thud. She knew she was caught. Jake just watched, his smile soft but strong. He didn't need to shout or brag. The truth was out, and that was enough. The police officers walked Corinne Winslow to their car, its red and blue lights flashing in the dark. Her head was down and her clipboard was gone, left in the grass like a forgotten toy. The neighbors in Jake Thompson's backyard watched, their eyes wide. Nobody said a word at first. It was so quiet you could hear the crickets chirping. Then, like a dam breaking, whispers started. "Did you see that? Corinne's in trouble. Jake did it." Jake stood by his shiny smart grill, the burgers still warm. His friends ran over, big smiles on their faces. Mrs. Lopez, who lived next door, gave him a huge high five. "You're amazing, Jake," she said, laughing. Mr. Carter, the old guy with the funny dog stories, clapped Jake on the back. "Good job, kid," he said, nodding. Even the grumpiest neighbors, like Mr. Jenkins, who never smiled, looked at Jake different now. He gave Jake a quick nod, like he was saying, "You're okay." Now, Jake just smiled back, his hands in his pockets. He didn't brag or make a big deal. That wasn't his style. But inside, he felt good, really good. He'd worked hard to show everyone who Karen really was, and now the truth was out. The police didn't just take Karen away and call it a day. Oh no, they took the HOA records too, all the papers and files Karen kept locked in her office. A few days later, the news spread like wildfire. Karen had been bad for years. She wasn't just mean, she was sneaky. She'd been taking money from the neighbors, calling it fines for silly things like tall grass or bright flowers. Thousands of dollars. But instead of using it to fix the park or clean the pool, she kept it for herself. She bullied anyone who asked questions, scaring them into being quiet. The neighbors were mad, but they were also happy. Finally, someone had stopped her, and that someone was Jake. Sunny Hills didn't waste time. The very next week, they had a big meeting at the community center. Everyone showed up, Mrs. Lopez with her cookies, Mr. Carter with his dog, even the kids who loved Jake's grill. They all sat in folding chairs, talking about what to do next. One thing was clear, Karen couldn't be HOA president anymore, not after what she did. So they took a vote, and every single hand went up to kick her out. Now Jake was there, sitting in the back, sipping a soda. Some neighbors wanted him to be the new president. "You're smart, Jake," they said. "You'd be great." But Jake shook his head. "Nah," he said, smiling. "I just want to grill my burgers." Instead, Jake helped them pick someone new. He suggested Mrs. Garcia, a kind older lady who lived down the street. She loved gardening, and her front yard was full of colorful flowers. She was the opposite of Karen. She never yelled, never bossed people around. When they asked her to be president, her eyes got big. "Me," she said. "Well, okay, if you think I can help." Everyone cheered, and just like that, Sunny Hills had a new leader. Mrs. Garcia got to work fast. She made sure all the fake fines Karen charged were given back to the neighbors. People got checks in the mail, and they couldn't stop smiling. The money Karen stole was used to fix things up. The park got new swings, the pool got shiny new tiles, and the community center got a fresh coat of paint. Sunny Hills started to feel like a happy place again. And Jake's Grill, oh, it became a neighborhood star. Every weekend, someone would invite Jake over to cook. "Bring that fancy grill," they'd say, and Jake would roll it out, its buttons glowing as it cooked perfect burgers and hot dogs. Kids would shout, "Grill, make us food," and laugh when it answered. Jake's barbecues were the best, and everyone wanted to come. As for Karen, she was in big trouble. The police found out she'd done more than just steal fines. They called it fraud and embezzlement, which means she lied and took money that wasn't hers. She had to go to court, and last anyone heard, she was selling her big house in Sunny Hills. She packed up her fancy red car and moved far, far away. Nobody knew where she went, and nobody cared. Sunny Hills was better without her. The neighbors never forgot what Jake did. He wasn't just the new guy anymore, he was their hero. But Jake didn't act like one. He just kept being himself, grilling food, waving at kids, and fixing his gadgets. That was Jake, quiet, smart, and always ready to do what's right. Hey you guys, what did you think of Jake's story? Have you ever met someone like Karen who tried to boss everyone around? Or maybe you know someone like Jake who surprised you with how smart they were. Drop your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and I can't wait to hear what you've got. Wow, what a wild ride, right? Jake Thompson seemed like just a regular guy with a cool grill, but he turned out to be so much more. He didn't look like a hero at first. He wasn't loud or big or showy. He didn't yell at Karen or try to fight her, but that's what made him special. Sometimes the person who looks like an easy target is the one with the biggest secret. Jake had all the cards and he played them just right. Think about it. Karen thought she could scare Jake because he was new. She thought her mean letters and bossy rules would make him give up, but Jake didn't give up. He didn't get mad or throw a fit. He just watched her, quiet and calm like a cat waiting for the perfect moment. He listened. He noticed things, and when the time was right, he let the truth do all the talking. That's what made Karen's jaw drop. That's what made the neighbors cheer. Life can be like that sometimes. Maybe there's someone at school who tries to boss you around like they're in charge of everything. Or maybe there's a kid who seems quiet and you think they're not important. Jake's story shows us something cool. The quiet ones, the ones who don't brag or fight, might be the strongest of all. They don't need to shout to win. They just need to be smart and patient like Jake was. So next time someone tries to push you around, remember Jake. You don't have to yell back or be mean. You can be like him, watch, think, and find the right way to stand up. Maybe it's telling a teacher, or maybe it's finding a clever way to show the truth like Jake did with Karen's sneaky finds. The truth is super strong. It's like a superhero power that nobody can stop. And hey, don't judge people too fast. That kid who seems boring, they might have a secret like Jake did. They might be super smart or really kind, just waiting for their moment to shine. Everyone's got something special inside them. Sometimes you just have to wait to see it. Thanks so much for listening to this story, you guys. If you loved hearing about Jake and his grill, give this a big thumbs up. Oh, and share it with a friend. It's way more fun when you talk about it together. I'll see you in the next story, okay? Stay awesome.